Today we're going to be reacting to the Minnesota Vikings 2-0 start this season. ESPN is not sold on them apparently. The Vikings are 11th in power rankings. They did go from 22nd to 11, but still not in the top 10. So I guess ESPN needs to see a week 3 win over the Houston Texans to have their trust. It is early on in the season, but I've liked what I've seen out of the Vikings. Week 1, they beat a bad Giants team. Sam Darnold looked great in that game. This one, however, changed everything to me. You have an elite Niners defense, and Darnold played exceptionally well, especially when Justin Jefferson left this game due to injury. Darnold made 2 mistakes to me. One of them was the interception to Fred Warner. I feel like a lot of quarterbacks would have made that same play, though. He just didn't see Warner, who was lurking over the middle of the field. And then Darnold also, it was like a 3rd and 3, and he didn't see where Nick Bosa was, and he tried to go right, and Bosa just sacked him. Darnold could have just stepped up and ran for the first down. But outside of that, that's 2 plays in a football game against an elite defense, the NFC champs last year. Darnold, 17 of 26, 268. He had my favorite throw of the week. It was to Jalen Naylor. It's like 3 defenders in the area, and there was a linebacker, I believe it was Warner, who was lurking in front of him, and he just put it in the perfect spot. I mean, it was such a good throw. I was thinking, how do you even make that? And all of a sudden, he just has the receiver coming back to him and falls down and makes the catch. It was unbelievably good. Looked even cooler in the all-22 camera. And then, of course, you have Ty Chandler, 10 for 82. Aaron Jones, 9 for 32. Jones lost a fumble. That was very unfortunate. Should have been another touchdown, but Fred Warner, of course, had that knockout. Man, was Fred Warner all over the place, man. I mean, that dude is the best linebacker without question in the game. In terms of Jones, he did add 36 yards as a receiver, so it was a pretty good game for Jones, of course. He's rushed for over 1,000 yards 3 times in his career. He was a big-time pickup for the Vikings. Darnold also added 32 yards with his legs, so he gives you 300 yards from scrimmage, which is great. All you can ask for. The Vikings signed him to a 1-year deal. Of course, they drafted J.J. McCarthy, who's now out for the season. I know you guys have been asking me to change the clips up, so I'll have to remember to do that for you because I have all McCarthy clips in there, man. I gotta get up the program. Darnold's now the quarterback of the future, at least I'm kidding, but for this year, he will be the quarterback. And I think that's a great thing for the Vikings because you have a head coach that believes in him, you have a scheme around him, weapons, and you've got a good defense. Brock Purdy gave his love to defensive coordinator Brian Flores after this game, saying that the scheme is crazy. I mean, Flores should be a head coach, of course, came from the Belichick tree. Did a great job with the Vikings defense last year, completely turned it around. With all due respect, I don't think Mike Zimmer was the greatest coach. And that's why the Cowboys are still struggling defensively even after giving him that job. I mean, the Vikings, the past 2 years with Zimmer, were like 30th in football defensively. Brian Flores is just the guy. There's no question about it. Justin Jefferson had a 97-yard touchdown catch. Jalen Naylor, 3 for 54 and a touchdown. Trent Sherfield had a catch. Brandon Powell had 2 catches, and Johnny Munt had 2 catches. So it was just a very good performance by the Vikings offense. They should have had 30 points. They had 23. Again, Aaron Jones, who just never fumbles the football, lost it down on the goal line, unfortunately. But the defense was really the storyline of this game, if we're being honest. Brock Purdy was sacked 6 times, had an interception, lost a fumble, 20 of 100. Pretty damn good efficiency. For Jordan Mason, who last week against the Jets had a good game as well. But the run game, 102 yards for the Niners. That's their bread and butter. That's what Kyle Shanahan does best, is running the football. And the Niners just never truly had a run game that was concerning to the Vikings. And throwing the ball 319 yards is a lot of yards. But on 36 attempts, you'll live with that if you're the Vikings. And they forced 2 takeaways. Well, technically 3 because I don't know if we count that as a takeaway, but that special teams block led to points. And that was a big-time play. That was the first block punt the Vikings had in 2 years, back in 2022. So very, very impressive by the special teams. Blake Cashman had 13 tackles. He was a free agent pickup, came over from the Texans. Ivan Pace Jr. in the next season of his career, his young career, had a big-time performance. We also saw one of the defensive backs for the Vikings have an interception off of a tip. One of their defensive linemen recovered a fumble. It looked like a pick, but the ball, you could tell, wasn't going forward, so they ruled a fumble. Van Ginkel nearly had an interception at the end of this game on a screen pass. He sniffed it out just like he sniffed out that Daniel Jones one early on not early on, but in week 1 of the season. The defense, it just pressured Purdy, whether it was blitzing or rushing 4. Love what I'm seeing out of the Vikings defense. I definitely am high in this team. The Vikings coming into the year, in my opinion, were sneaky because they had all the pieces to be able to dominate in the NFC, but they were just overshadowed by the Bears, overshadowed by the Packers, and overshadowed by the Lions. But I feel like true football fans knew that the Vikings had the potential to start off 2-0 and to be the best team in this division. It just would come down to Sam Darnold, and he's playing exceptionally well. I mean, Darnold looks like a starting quarterback. He was a starter with the Panthers. He was a starter with the Jets, but he was seen as a backup quarterback. That's why the Niners brought him in. But now, I mean, Darnold's going to get paid this offseason. He just needed the right staff and system around him. Just like how Bryce Young is failing, Zach Wilson failed. I know that's a little bit of an extreme example using Zach Wilson, but just some of these younger quarterbacks like Mac Jones, if they had fallen into good situations, I mean, I feel like they would have done very well, but they just didn't. And you look at a guy like Sam Darnold with how bad that Jets situation was. The Panthers didn't have faith in him. He was a backup for the Niners, but now he's got Kevin O'Connell, who runs a West Coast type of scheme similar to the Rams, the Packers, the Niners, that Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay type of scheme, right? Tree. I guess not really Mike McDaniel, but what it does is just play action, movement at the snap or before it, running towards the bubble, making sure the second level is just discombobulated, of course, doubling up front, and just putting your offense in a situation to where you have all the leverage and all the advantages. And that's why the Vikings have seen so much success with Kevin O'Connell. It hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows, but right now they have the NFL where they want them to be. The upcoming schedule for the Vikings: Houston in Week 3. It's going to be a big-time game at Lambeau in Week 4, at home against the Jets. So, I mean, we're talking about a Super Bowl contender in the Houston Texans, Super Bowl contender in the San Francisco 49ers. The Packers, if Jordan Love's playing, they're a Super Bowl contender. I don't assume he will be, so it's still going to be a tough game. My Colts just went into Green Bay and lost, but, I mean, the Vikings are a much better team than the Colts, at least as of right now. Jets is going to be tough, but it is at home. So I'll be honest, I do think the Vikings beat the Packers in Lambeau. I do think they beat the Jets, and I think the Texans get them in Week 3. Unfortunately, hopefully I'm wrong, but maybe they beat the Texans and they lose to the Jets. I think they'll win one of these two home games and then they'll win in Lambeau. So if that were to be the case, we'd be talking about that would be a 4-1 start. Who really knows at the end of the day what's going to happen? But you got to like this schedule if you're a Vikings fan. You feel confident in your ability to beat the Texans and the Jets at home at Lambeau. The Vikings probably are going to be favored in that game. The Colts were favored, so why the hell would the Vikings not be? Bye week, Detroit at home, at Los Angeles against the Rams, who might be without Kupp and Puka in that game, at home against Indianapolis, at Jacksonville and Tennessee, at Chicago versus Arizona versus Atlanta versus Chicago. All of a sudden, this is a very, very doable schedule for the Vikings because you're not getting Jordan Love in Week 4. And then, again, against the Rams, they're dealing without their two best players outside of Stafford. And, yeah, the Vikings are in a great position, man.